Let me tell you something, my friend.
Yeah.
I think we're about to hit on a topic that is going to cause a lot of reaction. I just want it to be good and godly and peaceful.
Can I say one thing before we do that?
Please.
There's something else you said from the last one about Corban. Because you said that I think that thing about having your family work with you, I mean, that really was only the top leaders. That
Yep.
like most the most
Yep.
most ordinary evangelists and leaders
Did not have that
did not
option.
have that. That was
Yeah, fair to say.
yeah.
Fair to say. And what does it say that only the top layer could? That says something by itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So this is in keeping with our topic now, which is leaders versus members. I want to start out with a post that I read very recently, days ago, on Facebook from someone. Well, it's from Nadine. So I don't need to say more than that. Most people know that she's left, writing articles regularly. She wrote, I spent many years as a single woman in the ICOC. Oh, this was actually from someone else, I think. I spent many years as a single woman in the ICOC, having to go to leaders' nice houses in plush neighborhoods to clean their houses, to do their laundry, and to watch their kids. And by the way, I'll come to Nadine's later, which I love just as much, but this is from someone else I remembered. All while I was trying to manifest dreams and careers and personal goals, only to have them shut down because I was always told I needed to put the kingdom first. Stinging indictment from this sister that I've never met. I mentioned earlier our wedding that was in Boston, March 20th, 1982. One morning, and I mean early, 5:30, Tanya asked me, "What's the topic today?" I was writing all this then, before we did our first recording. I said, "The topic today is our wedding." And we both opened up about our wedding, and she added to my memories. We paid for the main dishes for the night before at the rehearsal dinner, but they cooked it. The church members, they cooked it, served it, and cleaned up afterwards. And they also made the desserts. Fabulous desserts on a moving cart. Still remember. Tanya refreshed my mind. The reception after the wedding, everything was the same. People made their own food, came to the church after the wedding, served and cleaned. Even our wedding cake was made by a Christian member and donated. Did we thank them? Well, I can go no further without mentioning my confession, first confession on this topic. I don't recall ever thanking them. I don't recall even thanking them. And then Tanya went on to say it wasn't just those folks, it was everybody in our wedding. We had professional singers at our wedding. Didn't thank them, didn't pay them. Too much was taken for granted. Too much was expected. I'd only been an evangelist for a year and a half or 2 years when I got married. We didn't have the money. Not for this big wedding. But now we realize as I sit in a home being retired, and I remember we didn't thank them. And Tanya said it's bothered her for years and years. I've told this to a current member in the ICOC who responded, they wanted to do that to help you. They wanted to. They were not forced to do that. Okay, let me get really honest. I think that's largely true. I think a lot of those people, by the way, Tanya was loved by a lot of people. I had a nice connection with a lot of folks in the Boston church. I think that most of them probably were eager to do it and happy to do it. But here's the issue. As this continued year after year and decade after decade, it became an event where it didn't matter if people really wanted to do that or not. We weren't looking for volunteers that really wanted to come spend a few hours on this event. It was expected. And the more it became expected, the more the leaders failed to appreciate the disparity in our church with how leaders were treated and how the members in our church were treated. And so Tanya and I sat down that morning, just 50 days ago, and we wrote a thank you note. I'm going to read it out right now to everyone that was involved in our wedding. 42 years later is the title. Thank you so much for all you did to make our wedding so special. We know you gave up your weekend to help us, and we are so appreciative. Both of our families commented that they were so impressed with our friends and our church. And for that, we are so very grateful. Again, I'm sorry it took me 42 years to see this and say this. James and Tanya Lloyd. There's the thank you note. And as I was talking about that with Tanya, my younger daughter, Natasha, walked in the room and said, whoa, I know y'all were talking about this, but I've got to ask a question. Are you saying you did not pay those people to do those things? I said, no. Was that just for your event? Or is that standard around the world? Standard. And when the people came to watch your kids or to bring you food or to clean your house, you didn't pay them then? No. She said, okay, Dad. You know I gave you the title for this whole thing, Confessions of a Cult Leader. Yeah. I'm changing it now. It's Confessions of an Ungodly Cult Leader. I said, okay. So the title was changed again. My daughter, who's never been in a church, recognized how quickly did she see this for what it is. And Matthew, I got to tell you this, dude. Every time over the last few years that I bring up, what if the leaders got together and did a sermon about, what if the leaders got together and had just a Jubilee meeting in which the leaders talked about what we went through and apologized and offer hope? I could always count on you saying, what about the non-leaders? What about the singles? How about giving us a spot up on that stage? Because we had an experience that you cannot relate to, James. I've always appreciated that in you, Matthew. From the start, you have made the point of how the regular church members are treated so differently. So differently. Oh, you know an example? It's not in the notes. When regular church members sinned, oh yeah, we made a deal out of it. You better believe it. But wasn't that embarrassing to them? Yes, it was. It also was a sign to the rest of those church members, they better not try this stuff. Yeah, we read it out loud. Yes, we would warn them. Yes, we were specific about their sins. What happens when Kip is gone from leadership? I don't think he's being treated that way. You're going to call his sin what? Here we are. Here's the sin. Floundering spiritually.
Faltering spiritually.
Faltering spiritually. What the heck does that mean? I don't remember ever preaching about that. I don't remember definitely calling a brother out on that. It's amazing. And if you're not careful as a member, you go, well, if he's faltering, that's all I need to hear. You know, it, no, you can't allow that big of a, how about this one? Everybody's writing, Michelle Rowland wrote on this yesterday. When people are saying, so what's it like to be marked or disfellowship? He goes, no, I'm not. I'm not. Seriously. I know they said that, but nah, I'm vetoing that one. I'm doing fine with God. Thank you very much. And I thought, what if we could have done that all along ourselves? What if we could have said, I don't respect that thing you're calling me, that accusation, and I'm not going to adhere to it. So there. That's what's happening right now. And yet people in the church don't allow themselves to see that. By the way, when it comes to serving, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, you broke up a little bit, but we could.
Oh.
So your face stopped, and then just go back. People in the church could see that, something like that.
It's time that all of us that are in the church, and I mean ICOC or ICC or any other church, I don't even care, see that for what it is. As a member, it was never intended that you would be a servant and that we would be king. Do what we say. Don't do what we do. Don't do what we do. If you do what we do, we're going to mark you. But do what we say. And I think of how much we were served. Leaders. Now, on the other hand, we said whenever we saw positive examples of leaders in any of these ideas, we would bring them up, Matthew. And I think that's still good to do. And I've got to tell you, of all the years I was in the ministry, there was only one evangelist that ever visited my house for a couple of days, coming to London to preach, who served us. It may surprise you. Randy McKean. Randy McKean did. Randy McKean, after a dinner that we had together, jumped up, told Tanya, remain seating here with your husband. I'm going to go do the dishes. And Tanya was fighting. You can't do that. You're an evangelist. You can't come in here. And he was like, no, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I know what to do. I don't know where they all go, but I'm going to wash them and dry them and leave them right here where you can put them up where you need. And he got after it. You know what's interesting? All the memories Tanya and I have, she's 70 now. She talks about Randy coming to London and washing the dishes. That's the impact that act of service had on Tanya's life. She remembers that like her baptism, the time that we had an evangelist come to our house and do the dishes. I was telling this story to Bill Winfrey, a great friend of mine, who happened to be in Randy McKean's ministry in South Carolina at one stage. And Bill said, oh my gosh, just hearing that story from you jogged my memory. In Columbia, every Wednesday night after church, Randy would invite all the leaders over to his house just for refreshments. And every Wednesday night, while we were interacting and having fun, he was in the kitchen serving the drinks and washing the dishes with Kay. And I said, do you remember the date? And he said, oh yeah, fall of 1982. And he did this every Wednesday night. Confession. I traveled more than Randy. I've stayed in more members' homes than I care to even think about. I can't recall ever serving my host, washing the dishes, watching the kids, cleaning, vacuuming, any of those things. That's a confession. I'm sorry about that. I apologize for that. And I've got to give myself a little break because I can be kind of down on myself for that. But I can tell you this, if I could do it all over again, I would have been serving. And not just other leaders, but the whole church. The whole church. We hid behind that whole thing about it wouldn't be right for the evangelists to be passing out the food. They're way too spiritual. They're too effective. Let the others do that. Corban. Leaders. Oh, here's Nadine. Recent article. I was happy to serve, but on top of a full-time job and leadership responsibilities, I led 2 Bible talks as a young single. I was also a glorified babysitter and a maid for the leaders. I did not resent it. I was happy to serve. But looking back, that was definitely not right. Now, babysitting for a friend or helping with housework as a favor is totally fine. And we should serve one another as Christians. But several sleepless nights per week, staying up with crying babies who should have been taken care of by their own parents was too much. I had to get up and go to work the next day when they could lie and stay in bed. Cleaning the leaders' big houses. It's amazing how when anyone recalls going to a leader's house, it's always a mansion or a big house. It struck them, why is the leader living in the nicest property in our whole church? Doing that several times a week was too much. I'm pretty resilient, but I remember being constantly exhausted. No wonder so many of my peers started having autoimmune diseases. I know that over the years, people in the church have served me also, and I'm grateful, but prayerfully, it was not to that extent. I want to make a comment. By the way, you know how supportive I am about Nadine. Every single time I bring her up a name, she's a heroine to me. She is. And I'm telling everybody else, ease up. If you're negative towards her, ease up on it. What she's doing is brave and not easy. And I serve as proof. It's not as easy to leave and to share everything the day you leave. It's just not. Give that woman credit and give her some grace. But I wanted to mention this. Nadine Templar talks about when she was in London, how one of the leaders would line up the single sisters to twirl around. Okay, I see your front, but can you twirl around for me, honey? Because I want to tell you how many pounds you need to lose. Hey, us men are playing cards. You single sisters, after you get us our refreshments, how about some back massages here? Serving leaders meant babysitting, maid service, cleaning houses. Now, here's my point. What I just described was happening when Nadine was in London. She refers to these as the good early days. And it makes me wonder, my gosh, what makes them bad days? And I have found out it's the easiest thing in the world for me, for anyone else, to not see things for as bad as they were. And to start out with, it wasn't that way in the beginning. That eases our conscience a little. This is an interesting topic I think we discussed a week or two ago, and it got me thinking. Where was the greatest disparity regarding how people were treated in our movement? And I thought about it. Was it money? I don't think so. Believe me, I know the richest didn't have to come to Wednesday nights. We kind of all understood that. If they're rich enough, giving the money, you might even get out of a few Sunday mornings. You keep that check coming in, sir, the way you are. But I don't think it was people with money and people without money. I do not think that was the greatest disparity regarding how people were treated. And I don't think it was age. I don't. And I don't think it was race. By the way, there's a positive point to be made there. I don't think it was race. I don't even think it was gender, although I have that in second place. The greatest disparity is, are you a leader or are you a member? Because how you answer that question will determine how you're treated, how much respect you will be given. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I do. I'm very sensitive to the fact that I'm a white male, but that is my opinion. Yes, of specifically of the ICOC culture, the greatest divide was leadership and members, and that the greatest divide. Yeah,
That's an embarrassment.
Hmm.
So, Matthew, you know, I got baptized in October 8th, 1978, and moved to Boston when I was 6 months old in Christ, and became a paid leader shortly after that. You know what I was lacking? Time in the church as a member. And I'm afraid that that kept me from seeing things clearly. Like if you became an evangelist this week, let's say our group was still going, there's no doubt in my mind that you would be so sensitive to the needs of the members because of what you've known and experienced even as a member for so long. I didn't have that. But boy, did I get it when I left leadership. When I stepped out of the ministry and moved to Atlanta for the first time in a decade, I was reminded of what it's like to be just a member. First of all, they're not sending people to the airport to pick me up. What's up with that? And how come there's not a choir singing a few songs? We love you with the love of the Lord. Thank you, guys. I'm here. I've arrived. I found out what it was like to be a member. First Wednesday night. Tanya, we got to go. I don't feel like going. I don't either, but we got to go. Let's go. Let's have a good time. Meet some people. After the service, Tanya and I were both fellowshipping other people. Yeah, that was good. And after a while, Tanya went downstairs to pick up our two kids. And she was met with a stern rebuke that she remembers and talks about to this day. First church service, not in leadership. Don't let this happen again, Tanya. You're late. Now, if you were still a leader, it would be okay, because we would understand that you needed to have important conversations. But you're not a leader now. Don't let this happen again. Tanya walked out and didn't tell me that until we got in the car, and she said, I won't be coming back. Oh, great job. So the children's teacher was evangelistic that night and got us right, got my wife right out of it. Ex-leaders were regularly referred to as retreads, like old tires that hurt. By the way, Kip, I'm sorry if you ever make it. If you ever get back in your church, you are now a retread. You've been through this too many times. Kicked out of group 1, kicked out of group 2, refusing being marked or disfellowshipped. Dude, you're a retread. A retread. An old tire, still dangerous. You don't want to buy them unless you're poor. A retread. How's it sound? How's it feel? That's what I was called. My parting conversation with a brother in Atlanta, who was the only guy that treated me with respect, honestly, for those months that I was there before leaving the church. He was wonderful. I didn't even know him before I arrived. Let's go out and go fishing. I don't fish. I got you a fishing line. I got you. Look, I'm going to show you how. Okay, let's go. We're going to Lake Lanier. We'll do this every week. He was so wonderful. Loved time with him. When I left that church, he came up to me and he said, I'm sorry I wasn't a better friend to you. I said, you were the only friend I had. Even my friends from the church didn't get in touch with me. That was done. I said, thank you for the respect you showed me. I needed it. He said, well, I just need to tell you that the top leaders in our church here told me not to show you respect, that you need to be humbled. I wish I'd have done more. I needed to be humbled. Do you know what it's like to be a top leader in that church and then to step down out of the ministry? I needed to be humbled? No, you're exactly wrong. I never needed encouragement more than in those days. But it was not to come. And not only that, leaders were told to not provide that for me. That's what it's like to be a member. I remember that couple coming by that night and saying, didn't see your money today in the contribution. Well, that's never happened to me before. I was the guy preaching about the contribution. So how do you know I didn't give? And he said, because we have little packets that everybody puts their cash or their money in. They sign it. That way we know by Sunday night who gave and who didn't give. So we have to go to the houses of people and say, we know she didn't give. I remember telling them, good guy, don't come to the house anymore. And I'm not giving any more money to the church. No. No. My days of giving are gone now. Why would I pay to be treated like this? Two months earlier, after my first session with Gordon Ferguson, my new discipler in Boston after London, couldn't have been more shocked. Well, I thought tonight's meeting went pretty well, Gordon. What do you think? Yep. And that's why I'm going to lay right here on the floor, on my carpeted living room floor. Why are you laying there? Because I want you to get on my back and I want you to give me a back massage right now. Excuse me? We've had our first hour and a half together. Is this the way we end? Oh, I thought we ended with prayers. So what? So I'm sorry, I was missing that. So we end with me giving you a massage. Still remember his words. You were the big leader in London, having people give you massages, and now it's your time to give me the massage. That hurt. It didn't make me angry. It didn't make me want to be mean to him. Just hurt. By the way, that's a confession, not of a sin, just a vulnerability confession. What? And you're the man I'm supposed to now entrust with my future as my discipler? At a time in my Christian life when I needed the most encouragement, I got the least. I made the decision to leave the ICOC for good weeks later. The truth is, I'd never been sensitive to the class system in our church until I experienced it. And for that, I'm very sorry. Closing comments, Matt?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot there, James. Thank you for sharing all that.
Sure.
I'd like to talk more about it in the next one. The thing I would say, the thing that I guess, so I think when your friend talked about they were happy to serve, and when the dean says, she did that. So obviously, I think speaking as someone who never really rose up the ranks, so was always at the bottom. And I'm not saying I was the most serving brother. You know, I babysat and I did the communing. I did different things, but um, I think you are happy initially to serve. Like it's like I'm a
Yes.
Christian, and and
Yes.
uh, and especially and I think we served each other. It wasn't just the leaders. Like I helped sisters move house, which I ended up dreading. You know, initially, like, you know, because I had a car, you help them move, or you pick up someone from the airport, or you whatever. People helping at weddings. Initially, you are happy, but after, so Nadine then went into leadership herself and would have pretty much stopped doing those menial tasks because she would have become a leader. So she did it and then she moved on. But if imagine for Nadine as an example, she never rose up in leadership. She was always stuck babysitting the kids. And let's say she never got married. So she was always a single sister, getting older, babysitting the kids. And also, she also was in leadership. Uh, and this, to be fair, this was not that far off what my wife was in. There was a layer, especially, I think for the men, but I think especially for the women, of unpaid female leaders who took on a lot of responsibility in certain churches, discipling a lot of people. There was more women than men in the church most of the time, certainly in England. And they would be doing a lot of ministry stuff and having a full-time job and babysitting and cleaning houses and helping at weddings and doing singing and this and special contribution and for years,
Yes.
for years, you know.
Yes. Preach.
So I think to understand, like after a while, it's a bit like being in prison. And obviously you want to serve God. So you're doing all this, most of the people, members, they're doing it because this is pleasing to God. So, but and there's and that never changes. So if you're doing it for God, depending on what you believe, who God is and whether God exists, but your heart is pure. But it's very hard like the problem is you are kind of being taken. What I feel got revealed in 2003 is we were being taken advantage of. Now I'm not saying the leaders in their own way weren't being taken advantage. We all bought into the system. So we all
Yes.
bought into this thing of like, oh, but the leaders are more important. Like that verse, one of my least favorite verses, it is not right for us to wait at tables. We should be ministering the word. I think they blew it. I think the early disciples totally blew that. They should have said, no, waiting at tables is just as important. Let's work this out. But either way, we definitely took that. The ministry staff, leadership of KIP, took that on board. So it's a complicated. There's a complicated dynamic
Yes.
there. Of I'm not saying everybody's intentions were wrong, but in the end, what happened was you had a lot of members serving for years in very menial tasks, and after a while, you did not want to do it. Like
Right.
after I'd moved the 10th sister's house,
Yeah.
it'd be quite nice if the evangelist helped out to move the sister. You know, it started to like the resentments build up because yes, initially we were happy and Steve Allen, if anyone knows Steve Allen, amazing man, he was a big song leader in London. To be fair to Steve, even when we were in the church in the early days, Steve had a lot of insight as to what was going on that I
Ah.
didn't really. Yeah, he did. And one of the things he said was when there was stuff like this was like the early 90s when we, there was serving. He said, yeah, we have to be very careful. There is serving and it's great to serve, but we have to be careful it doesn't turn into abuse.
Oh,
Yeah, and I didn't. He just said that to me. We lived together in this house. I didn't
good
even
job,
register
Steve.
it. I didn't
Good
even
job.
register. Yeah, I didn't even register it. And to be fair to Steve, he was in the ministry, but he was always doing his own thing, which is why he didn't last in the ministry. He got kicked because he couldn't quite toe the line. He always was a bit too eccentric or a bit too had his own thoughts.
Loved him.
But so he mentioned that, and I remember obviously it stuck with me. Now I didn't take that on board fully because that was the early 90s. I couldn't, but obviously years later I look back and think, oh, Steve was on the money. So it's true we did want to help, but there comes a point where it just becomes abuse and it gets taken advantage of. And then the biggest thing I think I would say is in 2003, when it got revealed that actually there'd been a lot of lies by leadership. They actually had been There's financial issues. So they've been given money to pay babysitters, and they hadn't always used that money to pay babysitters. That was certainly in the UK what seemed to be the situation when the finances came out. And some people did pay. So that wasn't all leaders. And a lot of the leaders worked really hard. I don't think they were shirkers or the leaders that I knew. Uh, I have plenty of stories of evangelist leaders trying to help me, sacrificing their time. I remember when I was a young Christian, Archie Kendall, before he was full time, but he would wake up early in the morning with me to pray with me. I was a young Christian because I got a job in a bakery that my shift started at 6 in the morning. I remember Charlie Forden, Mike D'Souza, Tim Dannett really pouring time into me and trying to help, and
Great guys.
Seamus. And so it wasn't like they were shirkers. But I think when things got revealed in 2003 of like the misshapenness of it all, I think all I was asking, and I think a lot of us were asking, was just the leaders to hold up their hands and go, we blew it. Yeah, we blew it. We should have been serving at the weddings. We should have been babysitting as well. We should have paid you when we had the money. We probably shouldn't have been in the biggest houses. Yeah, we were studying the Bible with people, but we weren't doing that much evangelism. Or if we, it's like whatever the situation. We were under a lot of pressure. We were taught this from above. We were taught we were doing the right thing, and we believed it. It's all cool. It's like no one's here to lynch you. There was a lot of anger, but I think the problem I have with what your friend said about they were happy to do it is that was taken advantage of, not just for
Yes.
a few months. That was taken advantage of for years and years and years. And the people who did then say, I'm not happy with this isn't right, they were the ones who left. So it's not
Right.
like there weren't people who brought it up or brought up issues or said, this isn't right. Not necessarily about the serving, but other issues, the authority, the doctrine, some conflict with the leader. And there were a lot of those people because we now know there's about 1 million of them. like we baptized a lot of people. We studied the Bible with even more people. So there's a lot of people out there who did try and tell us and who weren't happy.
Hmm.
And they just got, and we forgot about them, and they were just like fallaways. So to say the people who remain
They had such critical hearts.
they have such critical hearts, exactly. And a lot of time they tried to bring up the issues. So the fallaways were the heroes, as far as I'm concerned. The fallaways were the heroes. People who fought. I knew a guy early 90s. He had an issue with the numbers. Uh, Most pure. Unfortunately, he's dead now. And I did get to have a little chat with him before he died. But I wish I'd said more to him because he was an amazing guy, really pure-hearted. He was like one of those guys you go, wow, this guy's just like Alistair. His
Like
name was
Alistair.
I can't remember his name right now. Rob Mapetla. Rob Mapetla. He was from Lesotho. He was on a university scholarship in Birmingham. And he left in like 92, 3 because he was like the numbers. Why are we so focused on numbers? And he tried to bring it up with the local evangelist. And he said to me, look, I've tried to bring it up with him, but he can't change it because it's bigger than him. It's not him, it goes higher. So, and he was very gentle. He didn't even want to tell me because he didn't want to discourage my faith. He knew me as a struggling brother. He'd always been more of a leader type and sort of able to, and I'd
That's
always been
good
a
hearted.
struggling
That's
brother.
sensitive.
He didn't want to cause, but I forced him to tell me like what's really going on. So he told me against his will. He just wanted to leave quietly. So there were these people like Camilla. I don't even know what happened with Camilla. People who are now dead, and it's heartbreaking. And I thank God that I believe we're all going to heaven and all be okay. But I think while we're still alive, like you said with the family, there are still people who left the church that we hurt. There's a girl, and these people, a lot of them are fine. They've got on with their lives. They're doing great. They're really doing great. They're thriving. But I know this girl, she's now got loads of kids. She's a grown woman, amazing woman. She used to, I won't say the couple, although I'm tempted. She used to like two couples. She used to baby, she was like 17 doing her A levels. She was like babysitting for them, like what Nadine said, like a crying baby. I think it had croup. The couple were upstairs in their room. She could hear the television coming from their bedroom. She's 17 looking after this kid, doesn't know what she's doing. Then she comes to London. She gets through her A levels. She comes to university in London. Now, an even more important couple she's helping out. She used to work at a shop called Marks and Spencer's, I think it was, and she would get a discount on the food. And the couple, this top evangelist couple, would expect her. And obviously, at the time, again, a bit like your friend said, she'd want to do it. It was like, oh yeah, she would leave her shift, travel like an hour to their house, leave because they would get this cheap shopping. She would leave the shopping on their doorstep. They wouldn't even say hello to her. Leave the shopping on the doorstep and then travel an hour back so she could get back to her studies. That was what she was doing at the age of 18. And there's other stories like that. These are not the only stories. There's a
No, I
million of
know.
them. A
I
million, a
know.
million. My wife has stories. I have stories. These stories are not made up. These are real.
Who did you meet?
Why would we make them up? We're not like, why
Exactly.
would we make them up? But these simple things that just went on all the time. This was the culture of the church. And it's okay, it happened. It's not the end of the world. We can forgive, we can move on, but we need to be honest about it. We've got to be
Yes.
honest about it.
Thank you. And by the way, since you mentioned Alistair, let me just say he was there when I was there.
Yeah.
So he was met in the South Zone. When I had a leaders meeting with all our Bible talk leaders, we met him. We actually met him. Who? Jesus. Whoa, what do you mean? We met Jesus. And guess what? He's got a Scottish accent. So what is this? His name's Alistair. James, against this man, there is no problem. He's 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 Jesus. I'm not saying that he doesn't have a shortcoming, but we haven't met someone in a long time who's this loving. He thinks he's a Christian now, and Lord knows he serves everybody whenever he can, but we got to teach him that he's not really a Christian. And we're having a hard time because we think he's more of a Christian than we are. That's just the truth. Okay, so that's our meeting that we're having.
Yeah.
And we studied with him. And he ended up not joining us, did he? Did he
No, he
join
joined.
ever?
He joined. And then this is
Joined for a short while?
he went in the ministry and then he came out of the ministry. And
He
he
was in the ministry immediately. He was in the ministry immediately because he was thinking more godly than
he
we
wanted to
were.
be a missionary. So I think you guys, I remember because I remember hearing him speak and he was like he just exuded love and purity and like and he
But man,
wanted
what was
apparently he was
his
on his
reason?
well,
What was his
I
reason
will
for
tell you,
leaving?
Tina, my wife, asked him,
Yeah.
I think she won't mind me sharing this. Alistair, what happened? And he said to her, he said, why did you leave the ministry? He said, Tina, I just, and I won't do the Scottish accent.
Do you do your Scottish accent?
He said, Tina, I just love people too much to be in the ministry.
I love people too much to be a leader in this group.
And to be honest, I know another friend of mine who was met a guy, incredible guy, most pure heart. I was this guy. I'm going to say his name because I can't find him. Winston Philp. If you're out there, Winston, I'm so sorry for being an idiot. Winston Philp. He joined the church. Charlie Ford met him. Incredible guy. I was filled with envy for him because he had everything. He was joyful. He was warm. He was encouraging. He was pure-hearted. I spent my time confessing to him, "Oh, I'm really jealous of you. I struggle with the fact that, and he'd be like, he'd sort of put his arm around me and laugh and say, bro, I love you." And he went into the ministry. He came out like within a couple of months, he'd left the church. And I don't know what happened, but I know he felt there was racism. He was a
Oh,
guy, yeah, he felt there was racism. He felt there was all sorts of other stuff behind the scenes that was going on. He just felt really uncomfortable about what he saw. He was like he'd sort of seen behind the curtain, and he left. And I remember like I think it really hurt him. Like I
sure.
think he said he was. Well, I met him years later when I was evangelizing, and I was still trying to kind of bring him back, and he didn't want to. He was like, "I know you're going to try and bring me back. I'm not." He said he was grateful for the fact it changed his focus in his life. But these pure-hearted guys, man, I think they saw through it quite quickly, and they were quite hurt by it because I think on the surface
Hmm.
we offered, hey, this is the way. We're really going to love everybody. We really are different. We're true Christians. We're true Christians. And I think we wanted to be that. Anyway, I'm going on and on.
Great thoughts. No, yeah, we were not teaching.
Did
We
you,
are.
so Alistair left, I think. I don't know when Alistair left. It wasn't immediately. He might have left after you left, in fact. I don't know.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
just remember how much he impressed everybody.
yeah,
Well, I want to close out with something that was mentioned in this talk, but it's actually advice to anyone that's ever listening, especially to members, current members in the ICOC. I'm about to give you a trump card that you can play whenever because it can get you out of helping people move, which I know is still happening. So here it is. Whenever for the last 30 years, anytime someone has called me and said, "Can you please help me move our house on Saturday? I've got a truck coming over. We got pizza." That's what it's usually. And I would say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you move. Bad back." And whenever they would say, "You got a bad back?" I'd go, "Nope, but if I come help you move, I will." That was my favorite line, and I want to hand this out to everybody today. It has kept me from many a moving party, and it's true. It's
but
actually honest.
no, that's great, Jack. I mean, I moving was the worst one, and to be fair, it wasn't. I did help move leaders, but often it was single sisters. They were the ones.
Sure.
And
Sure.
and and I was going to say this quite often. You'd say to the single sister, "So how much?" Oh, just a few bags, just a few bags,
Oh, just a few bags.
couple of things, couple of boxes, and you'd get there, and it would be like 25 boxes, 17 bin bags, a stereo, and all of it. It would be like, and then it would just be a nightmare. And I'm glad we helped. I'm not saying at the end of
Sure.
the day it's good to help. It's just it's got to be done out of. We can't be forced into it. It's not slave
Yes.
labor, but yeah.
Thank you.
So I wanted to, if it's okay with you, and I just asked you off camera if it was, but uh, to talk a little bit because obviously we're recording these, and stuff is still going on all around us in life. And one of the things was that Nadine Templar posted quite a long piece about spiritual abuse. And obviously, I knew Nadine and Mark from London and from India a little bit, and we've had some. I haven't really seen Mark since 2003, and Nadine I've had a few interactions with over the last few years, just on Facebook and messaging. And I appreciated her post yesterday, where she outlined the spiritual abuse that she'd experienced, and she obviously acknowledged that she'd probably done some very similar things. And I'm happy to leave that there for another conversation. But one of the things that came out was that some of the staff who'd been made redundant or who'd left the ministry had signed NDAs,
Mhm.
non-disclosure agreements, which
Yeah.
I'd heard rumors of that, but I think the dean was the first public official. I don't know about official because she's not official, but certainly the first public acknowledgement of that from a former top leader. So I
I
thought
think
that
you're
was
right.
interesting, and also a lot of stuff about sexual abuse in London that she'd experienced, or harassment, maybe not abuse, harassment, abuse. I think there is. I think you could. I'm pretty sure there has been abuse. Uh, uh, it's a dangerous territory because it's some of this stuff is legal, gets into legal territory, and I don't feel qualified to deal with that. But certainly, people can go and read Nadine's article is there for anyone to read it. I think it's called "My Experience of Spiritual Abuse" or something like that. So I don't know. It's just and I guess the point I wanted to make is this is my because I wrote a couple of posts after it saying, basically challenging the ICOC to come clean about everything and sort of saying why, come on, the jig's up. We can't keep going on revelation after revelation after revelation and kind of pretending. Let's just talk about this. Let's have an open discussion. Ex-leaders, leaders, members, ex-members, whoever wants to. We obviously screwed up. There's no doubt we screwed up. There's no doubt that there's a huge problem with the ICOC and what we did and our doctrine and our dishonesty and all those. There's a huge. Let's talk. Like, there's no point in just trying to carry on. I'm talking mainly to the people who are still members. Let's evangelize. Let's evangelize. It's like, come on. That's that. First of all, let's talk about what went wrong. Otherwise, you're just bringing more people into a dysfunctional situation. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Well, I appreciate it. And I read it as well. My wife read it. I'll be adding some comments later today on that. And by the way, perfect time for you to bring it up because the topic is power is intoxicating. This is part two. We did part one in the previous session. Power is intoxicating, and I think the things that she wrote about fit into this category, that it's outrageous, the things that she was a part of, that she witnessed, and has many friends, her peers, who went through even more sexual harassment than she did, by her own words. I'm curious about this before we move on, though. What is your understanding or thinking, Matthew, about why she was not asked to sign one of those non-disclosure agreements when she knows more than most of the people who have been asked to sign them?
I mean, I have no idea what goes on in the internal workings of the ICOC. I mean, Nadine was working for Hope last before, and then when she was a minister, she would have been a minister in India last time. And I don't know about this. This is also, I would imagine her and Mark had quite a lot of power in India because they pretty much started the churches there, and a lot of those
You
churches.
mean she knew so much we better not hold her to this?
No, I just don't think the ICOC would have had power or confidence in India to tell her to sign an NDA. It's the
Oh,
kind of thing a church like LA or Chicago or New
gotcha.
York or
Boston.
and again like Boston huge. Well, Boston, I know that with that one girl who worked
Yeah,
with
in the
her.
Hispanic ministry.
So, the bigger kind of American churches probably, I don't know about England, and I'm sure it wasn't always the case. And I don't know who else has signed NDAs, but even the fact that if one person was asked to sign an NDA in what is supposed to be the true church of Jesus Christ, of God, which represents honesty and we confess our sins, it's like it just tells you, and it clearly wasn't just one person, and there's clearly so much other stuff that's not being talked about. So I don't know why. I don't know what, I was an assistant Bible discussion leader, and I was briefly a Bible discussion leader. And most of the time I was a Bible discussion leader, I don't even know if I was ever officially a Bible discussion leader. Maybe in Israel, where there were like 12 of us in the church, I might have been. And in London for a brief period, I might have been. But basically, I don't, for me, it was like a fun occasion going to a leaders meeting because I hardly was ever. Most of the time, I used to live in one of those kind of ministry houses where we had the baptistry in our garage, so
Oh,
people
yeah.
used to get baptized, and we had a lot of leaders meetings in our living room. And I
24 hours a
wasn't.
day.
What's that?
24 hours a day for
Yeah,
baptisms.
yeah. I was upstairs in my bedroom waiting for the leaders meeting to finish so I could go through the living room to the kitchen to make a cup of tea.
Sure.
So I'm not privy to what has gone on in these high level meetings,
Yeah.
James. That is more your cup of tea.
But you're
I'm
you're
not trying to
right.
shove it onto you. I've got my own issues, but I
Right.
definitely wasn't in the room
Well,
for
I
any
want to make this
sort of
point
decision
before we
making.
move on
Yeah,
past Nadine, and that is, and I've not told her this yet. I started
yeah,
to yesterday. I'm a big supporter of Nadine.
yeah.
I'm a big supporter of what she's done and what she's doing. And I seem to have a little more grace for her than a lot. She's hearing it from all sides. She's hearing it from people in the church. Why are you telling the world about this? That just hurts our cause. Why don't you work things out with the leaders? She's hearing it from people who have left the church. Why aren't you more bold? Why don't you speak up? Why don't you name the names? To me, that's a really unfair situation she's put in when she's trying to be pure with her own heart. And I want to just offer on her behalf, request, give her some time, give her some space, let her resolve a lot of these things. I know it's urgent, I know it's important, but I'm here doing this recording today. I'm going to be 70 in a few months. I got out of the church when I was 38. It's over 30 years since I've been out, and I'm still working through a lot of stuff. Here I am. For the first time, I'm sharing exactly what I believe about all these things, and all it took was for me to wait 32 years after I got out. She got out in January. Let's be grateful for her. Let's be gracious towards her. Let her work things out in her time, not our time.
So I hear you.
I'm
And
not saying that just to you.
no,
I'm sharing
I
that
know.
with all
Listen,
of
I'm not taking it. I think there's other people who maybe are more critical than me, and there's a whole, and I deeply appreciate her putting herself out there. I mean, who else is really doing it?
There you go.
It's very, very rare. You've done it to a degree.
Yeah.
Steve's done it a little bit by allowing you to do it on eavesdropping. Marty Wooten's kind of come out a bit. But apart from that, like, Kevin Darby a little bit, people like Doug Jacoby a little bit, but in a very sort of protected, he's not really on Facebook, having to deal with people. Gordon Ferguson put stuff out, but he's even more protected. It's like he's even more distant, and he still supports a lot of the stuff. So she is a rare gem, and I really appreciate it. But from my point of view, sometimes she said things I can't just ignore, or I
Okay.
haven't so far. Like even, and I've sort of stopped commenting on her page to give her a bit of space. We had some sort of conflict and discussion,
Yeah.
and I thought, okay, let me at least not comment on her page for the moment because I want to give her space. I might post her stuff on my page, and then I can write what I want. But that it's difficult there because I find it difficult to just let things that I don't think are true or that I think are deeply problematic just pass. And I'm not trying to attack her for it. I'm just saying, hey, hold on. I think if you think about this, it doesn't make sense, or like, is that really the case? Because dum dum, and it's difficult because it does become. I do feel sometimes like a prosecuting attorney
Right.
or
Right.
barrister, as we'd call them in England, and I don't particularly want to be that. But I don't want to be like we were in the church, where oh no, we mustn't speak, And I think for me the key is, do I love Nadine? This, I think I do. As far as I know, I love Nadine, but I also love the truth, and I also love honesty, and I think we have to uh, uh, gently as possible, just gently remind, like, hey, do you remember what you and Mark used to do? And I mean, this is about Mark, not Nadine. But the last time I spoke to Mark, he didn't want to talk to me. And Nadine's saying, "Oh, Mark's fully repented and Mark's fully changed." And I'm thinking, the guy didn't want to talk to me 20 years ago. He knows I'm out here. He's made no effort to reach out to me. Nadine's in touch with me, so it's not like he can't. I said to Nadine the last time I saw Mark, he didn't want to talk to me. The last time I was in York Hall, I'm sorry to go into this, but I was in York Hall, it's 2003, and I was literally saying, when is the abuse going to stop? And it was a huge meeting, and it was like I was challenging what had happened with the London Council, and then I think pretty much the last thing I said in that public meeting was, "When is the abuse going to stop?" And 20 years later, the dean's writing a thing about spiritual abuse. And that very meeting, after that meeting, Mark didn't want to talk to me. Now Nadine did talk to me after that meeting. She sort of said, "Oh, Mark, just give Mark a bit of space." And she was, to be fair to Nadine, she did talk to me. She didn't. She treated me kindly and well, but Mark didn't. And so for her then to say, "Well, Mark's fully repented," I can verify. Well, from my point of view, I'm still waiting for the phone call. I'd like a phone call from Mark. It's not like I can't believe he's not aware of me, especially since I've been interacting with Nadine. It would be very strange. And I'm happy to contact him, but I kind of feel like, well, you
I
didn't
think we
want to
just
speak to
have
me
to be
last time.
patient, and I would love for you to be patient with him. By the way, just so that you know, you're
Yeah.
not viewed as the ordinary rank and file member that someone that was in leadership would want to interact with. Matthew,
Oh,
well, it's what
you,
Steve Johnson used to call me,
sorry,
bombastic.
you froze for a second there. I'm not the ordinary rank and file member.
I challenge you one time and you turn your volume down. Uh, I'll say it again. You have a reputation of not being the easiest that you do still come out with, but let's get all the truth out. Thank you for giving me 75%. I want the other 25. And I'm just saying, I love you to death. That's why I chose you to do this series with. And I also am aware of someone who left the church. If people that are really seriously thinking about leaving the church now look to see how Nadine is being treated, that can make a difference. It can be, I don't want to go through all this where everyone around the world is saying, say more, more, tell all the truth. You're still holding back some. That's very intimidating. and off-putting. So I love your spirit. You're doing everything right. You're wanting the truth and the truth only. I don't think you have vendettas. I think there is love in your heart. And that's one of the reasons I love you so much. I just want to have patience with that couple. I don't care if it's 3 more years before they start bringing up some of the other things that they're more comfortable with. It's been so recent. Remember, they didn't leave a church. They left a cult. And with that,
I mean, there's further problems, James,
it's
because they haven't even exactly left. They're still in the church in Kathmandu.
well, I'm pretty sure if you ask the leaders around the world about her status, they would say, yeah, she made a 10 there,
Um,
but she left
Again,
the church. Hey, I went to a Church of Christ after I left. I
no,
attended the
listen.
Church of Christ.
Hey, I went.
I attended a traditional Church of Christ
Listen,
for a
during
while.
lockdown, I never was a member, but I did attend. I attended like the Thames Valley or part of the Thames Valley ICOC, which used to be part of the London ICOC, and
You
it's still got
heretic,
connections.
you
Yeah,
heretic.
and I attended because I was curious, and they were lovely people,
Sure.
and they didn't shut me down. To be fair, just in the end, I got too frustrated again with we're not talking about the real issues here. Endless lessons about the Bible and this and that. Let's talk about what we did for 20 years. Like, why are we not
We don't
talking about this stuff?
we don't want to bring that up.
But it's such a great, and I hear what you're saying about Nadine, and I hope she has the courage. I mean, it does take courage. I think it took courage
And
for
it
you.
takes time.
Yeah, it takes time and courage. I think she's dealing with a set of issues. So the issue she's dealing with, sorry to go on about this, but is so when I left in 95, when I fell away in 95, I thought I was going to hell. I had no friends. My old school friends, only a few of them wanted to see me. I hadn't seen them for 7 years. The people in the church I couldn't hang out with anymore. I was socially stunted because I didn't really understand how social scene in the world works. I've been in the church since I was 20. I thought I was a complete failure. So I had to deal with that. When you left the church in 92, whatever, and you had to work out what you were doing, you had no support network. So Nadine, to be fair to her, she has got quite a lot. It's a very different situation. She's not leaving like Jerry Jones left or Rick Bauer left.
It's a lot easier now.
It's easier, but she's also got a huge number of ex-members
Right.
wagging their finger at her as well, going like, "You're not being honest about what you've done. What about this? What about that? Why didn't you do this?" So I understand she's now got her challenges, and so it's different. There's no. I don't think she's even remotely thinking she's going to hell for what she's doing. I don't think she's remotely thinking at this point anyway. Oh my gosh, I'm leaving the one true church or anything like that. But she's obviously, so we've all got our challenge. I'm not saying that to say, oh yeah, just pile. I don't believe we should just pile it on the dean. I think the dean is doing an incredible job in terms of like raising issues, and uh, I think she's doing an incredible job. I just feel like I can't just ignore certain things, but I try to be gentle. I try to be fair, and I would encourage everybody to, search their own hearts and be as kind as possible. And
Fair
we've all
enough.
just got to be gentle with each other as much as we can. I know that comes from me, who often writes very intense things.
I'm going
And
to be
I,
talking more about her today, by the
okay,
way.
all right.
Well, that was necessary conversation. So let's not think, boy, we really got off to a slow start on today's lesson. No, that is today's lesson. And power is intoxicating. And this is the one section of the writings that I've done that I'll spend the most time in. So we may be doing this for 3 more lessons. I don't know. I'm not going to rush through it. Power is intoxicating. And just as a reminder, if you didn't see the previous episode, Richard Rogers, power is always intoxicating. Power of a preacher, extremely intoxicating. But being a preacher in your group, I haven't seen anything like it, as he said. Everybody thinks you're something big. Everybody wants to talk to you after the service. Everybody wants to sit in the front rows. They shout amen. They do this. They take notes. Who brings notepads to church? They take notes on everything you're saying. They come up and rush up to you afterwards and tell you what a great message it was and how it helped. And he couldn't even get over it. He just thought, how can this not affect the preacher? And I'm saying it did. It did. It has, and it will. And we revered our leaders to such a degree that it became easier for narcissism to creep in. It just did. And it does. But I want to at least give one of my stories, because I haven't done a confession today, of power being intoxicating. And maybe one of the reasons I wasn't so quick to get into the story, it's embarrassing. So sometimes I do that when I know the next story I'm going to mention is embarrassing. And so I might try to hold it off by making other comments. I'm going to actually have you set up the story, if you don't mind, because it was only a week or two ago when you said, do you mind if I talk to you about something today that's not so easy? And I would say it's a rather indelicate story that I've recently heard about you, James. Well, first of all, the fact that you called it an indelicate story really did capture my imagination. I just got to tell you, it's not a phrase that I would normally use. So I want you to go ahead, if you will, and share what you heard so that I can respond.
So this is what I heard, and I heard this probably when I was a young Christian. So it was probably like uh, early 90s, or maybe even late 80s, from a girl called Caroline. I won't say her second name. We both know who she is, and she'll know who she is. She was part of the London church at that time, and sort of an early convert.
I'll just mention I love her and always did love her.
Yeah, yeah. Her and her husband. I used to catch them taking secret walks when they were courting. I said, "Oh, wait, you two are always together." When they were dating, somewhere in East Finchley, I think. Anyway, she told me. So this is how she told it to me.
Sure.
So she said, "Oh, there was a time when James and Doug they got with the main line, the traditional Church of Christ, and I can't remember exactly what she said, but in my mind it was like, oh, and they was this, sort of James and Doug was sort of challenging them about, you need to be serious about sin and sexual immorality and people making disciples and you guys don't really take it seriously." And one of the ministers there brought up to James, well, what about you being overweight? Like, if you're so serious about sin, how come you're overweight? And the way Caroline told me, and this is what I felt, firstly, and I apologize again, James, for being indelicate. Firstly, that. And then the second thing was James, she said, James, there was nothing James could say. And it was kind of embarrassing for James. So, and it kind of always stuck in my mind. And I only brought it up with you after we got to know each other a bit because I felt like I didn't want to be embarrassing you or putting you down in any way or anything. But that was the story.
Thank you. Yeah, it's as embarrassing the second time as it was the first. So, and I'm glad you brought it up. And by the way, I'm just going to tell you, I love Caroline to death and always did. I never worked with her. She was never in our zone, but she, from the earliest days, she stood for love. She had the voice of an angel and a sense of humor that was probably the most attractive quality I found. She had a beautiful sense of humor that I always got a big kick out of. So nothing with her. I'm glad she told you. When you told me the story, it was at the end of our call, and so we said goodbye to each other. And I told you even then, I don't remember that comment, but I do remember the situation. Because I remember one time Doug and I were invited up to Corby, where there is a British school, Bible school. So we went up there, and I remember it being a beautiful building, maybe even round, to where Doug and I were sitting up there like on the hot seats, and then there was people all around us, and it was from churches, not just one church, and the Bible students were there from Corby, I believe, and a lot of the preachers were there. And then we even brought some of our members, like Caroline, and I don't know how many others, but probably a few handfuls of our own members to observe. I remembered all that. And I remembered it being a pretty intense day. I don't remember that comment to me. So anyway, the call was over for us 2 weeks ago. And I kept thinking about, I wasn't offended, but I was a little hurt. And I was thinking, who Who would say that? I mean, who would make a comment like that to someone they don't really know about something that's sensitive? And I think the line that you used, because I wrote it down, if your group is so averse to sin, what about your weight, James? You're obviously overweight. How do you explain that? The following day, I was reflecting and I had a new insight. And it felt really good. It felt right. It felt spiritual. It felt godly. And my insight was this: that comment that minister, I think he was a minister, that comment that he made was rude. Let's just admit it. That was rude. And I realized the part of it that bothered me more than even my own pride was this. Number one, English people are polite. Let me just make that general statement. The funniest thing is when I told Matthew that 2 weeks ago, he went, "Not always." No, wait, I went, no, dude, I have worked with every group of people around the world just about. And I'm telling you, you can say, well, it was a long time since you lived here. I'm telling you, the British are polite. We still haven't even learned how to do the queue here in the States, the line to wait for something when everybody wants to go. There ain't no queue here. It was so polite when we were there. And I thought, wait a minute, this wasn't just a British man saying something impolite. This was a Christian British man. That's the ultimate of politeness in my book. It just is. Why would he say that to me? So my mind went from what had he said to me to why would he? What had I said that day that would prompt a comment like that? That was the way I processed it. And there was no better way in the world for me to process it than that. Because as soon as my mind went to, what had I said that would elicit a comment like that? Well, I know the answers. I'm sure it was hours of, that's the reason we came to London, because you're not getting it done. That's the reason we're here. I told one of the younger brothers that I'm training in the ministry the other day, I'm going to the Kensington Church of Christ to visit next week. How long have they been here? 110 years. Oh my gosh, they must be thousands and thousands. No, they're 14 right now. They're 14 people. That was our attitude. That was my attitude. While we're here, you should be asking us, please show us how to do this. Your ministry people ought to be moving to London so they could find out how to create a successful church that can be self-sustaining. I can hear those words coming out of my mouth, and Doug Arthur's as well. I mean, we were together on this. We saw it the same. And when I realized what I allowed myself to say to a group of Christian men, older men, I was the young guy. I should have been showing them the respect that they deserve. If I could do it again, I would have been saying, we need help. We love God. We want to save the lost. We study our scriptures. We spend all of our time doing this. We give all of our money to do this. But we're immature. We don't have the Bible knowledge you have or the life experience. And we need your help. And what we're hoping we can do is meet regularly to talk about these things. Or have some of your men come down and preach for us to hear your perspectives. I promise you, had we been saying those things, nobody would have been talking about my way. So that's my confession. My confession was I could be so arrogant about the group I was in and the group I represented that it would even tempt a gentleman, yea, an English gentleman, to make such an embarrassing comment to me. That's my confession. The intoxicating power of being a leader in our group led many of us down that path. And your story, to me, was a good reminder. And just hearing it 2 weeks ago was a good reminder to me that that power had already changed me, even in those early days. Thoughts on that?
So thanks, James. Couple of things come to mind. The first one was I, that verse about twice the son of hell.
Yeah.
So I was harsh in my evangelism. So what I got from the ICOC when I got baptized in '88, and the Bible says we've got the truth. All other denominations, all other religions, all atheists, everybody else is wrong. So I now have my license to go out and tell every other single human being who's not part of our group how wrong they are. So I would challenge priests, I would challenge Pentecostals, I would challenge Jews, Hindus, Muslims, atheists. And I think when I first did it, there was a period at the beginning where I really felt empowered, like not power, like from God. I felt like I came up with some good arguments, but as time went on and my Christianity didn't work out the way I thought it was going to, like I was unhappy and I was struggling and there was a lot of anxiety and guilt and fear, but I would still evangelize a lot to the point where it became I could be quite aggressive with people, quite nasty. I remember a guy threatening to punch me in the face. I was like that walking down a packed commuter train in London, the tube full of like hot commuters going to work or coming back from work. And I was going, I'd like to invite you to a Bible talk. Have you heard about Jesus? And this guy going, I'm going to punch you. And me not responding, me going, yeah. So there was an aggression in me. It wasn't like there was like a sort of, I'll show you kind of thing. And there was even one time I was on the tube reaching out to this guy and I was telling him how good it was being a Christian. And then he said, well, why are you twitching? And I was like, I'm not. And he said, look, I can see you're twitching. And I was so kind of wound up and anxious and in a debate with this guy that I sort of had this little, it was like, I was twitching there. And I was going, no, I'm not twitching. And I got off at the next station. I sat until the twitch went away. So that's kind of like, we are right and you are wrong. Obviously, I adopted that. And I have to take ownership. I'm not blaming you and Doug for that or even Kip. That's me. That's me doing that. That's my choice. So that's what came to mind was like, oh, I did very similar things. And then the other thing about the fact I sometimes, even today, so I get into lots of arguments on Facebook with Christians about heaven and hell and sin. And they're going, well, homosexuality is a sin. And I do bring up this thing sometimes, like, well, what about fat people? Why are fat people allowed in the church? And because they're clearly practicing fats. They're clearly some of these people have been fat for 20, 30 years. They're clearly still eating. They're still being greedy. And I'm fat. Look, I'm sitting here. I'm not like, I'm only doing it to try and point out, which I think the guy probably was trying to point out to you. Once you go down that road of kind of righteousness, of like this, you inevitably the finger gets pointed at yourself.
Thank God I'm not like that man.